Hello and welcome to PLMA's special three-part report, Recession and Recovery. What's ahead for store brands? Now, not since the Great Depression of the 1930s has an economic crisis had such extraordinary impact on American buying habits, and in turn, on manufacturers and retailers. Well, one result has been a surge in store brand sales at supermarkets, drug chains, mass merchandisers, with forecasts of still more store brands growth in the years ahead. Well, will it continue? Have consumer buying patterns changed permanently? And what do retailers and their suppliers have to do to maintain the momentum? Well, today with me is PLMA President Brian Sheriff with hopefully all the answers. Right, Brian? What's at stake?
Well, it could be as much as $55 billion.
Really? The
amount of money is quite staggering. If you take a look at the amount of money spent in grocery sales every year, it's about $300 billion. 1 percentage point would be $3 billion. And any time that moves from national brands to store brands, it represents a huge amount of money.
And what's been the movement percentage-wise?
Well, over the last year and a half, private label has grown by 2 percentage points.
So if my math is right, that's $6 billion.
Yeah, and the implications for the future are even more dramatic.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we'll hear a lot more from Brian. Of course, there is considerable confusion over whether we are in a recession or whether we're starting on the road to recovery. So we asked our retailing guru, Michael Sansolo, to consider the possibilities. Michael?
Thank you, Jody. You know, the confusion over whether we're in a recession or a recovery isn't something that you alone have. There's this old saying that if you took all the world's economists and laid them end to end, they'd never reach a conclusion. Economics is really an art that we can't measure. And in fact, that's why there's all this confusion. Here's the key measure of a recession. What economists tell us is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth in the gross domestic product means we're in a recession. And Lord knows, over the last year, we've been in a recession. But halfway through 2009, something happened. GDP grew, and in fact, in the 4th quarter of 2009, GDP grew at a pretty healthy rate. So technically, we are no longer in a recession, at least according to what the economists say. The problem is, not every consumer is an economist. And when you think about the shoppers out there, think about the news that they're hearing, seeing, and consuming every day. They see, number one, the most important bit of news is the unemployment rate. And the unemployment rate, honestly, is a lagging economic statistic. The unemployment rate right now is around 10%, highest level it's been since the early 1980s. And there's very little sense that it's going to come way lower fast. So a lot of shoppers are looking at that rate and they're thinking, well, they're telling me the recession's over, but people aren't getting their jobs back. And one of the troubling numbers behind the jobs is more than 7 million jobs were lost in the United States in over an 18-month period. That's a lot of jobs to go away, and that colors the economic mood of the consumer. Other things shoppers notice are their homes around them. Now here we have some really terrible statistics. The average foreclosure rate in the United States, historically, has been about 1%. Over the past couple of years, it's gone up to 5%, 5 times the average rate. And so people are seeing that and they're worried about hanging on to their homes. They're hearing stories about personal bankruptcies. They're seeing the value, the cost they paid for their house dropping below what their home is currently worth. In fact, the Washington Post recently did an article where they talked about how mortgage rates are historically low, but there's a huge number of consumers who can't even qualify to get those rates because their houses aren't worth what they paid for them. So the confluence of all this brings us to this great point of confusion. Yes, the recession technically is over, but in the minds of our shoppers who are looking at unemployment, who are looking at housing, who are looking at all these patterns in the economy, they don't agree. And that's one of the reasons why consumer confidence, as measured by various bodies around the United States, remains at a fairly low level. So here's what I think. Technically, the recession is over. Clearly, the statistics tell us that. But in the minds of the shopper, is their psychology still rooted in the recession? And how is that going to impact how they're shopping and how they're buying over the next year and maybe even beyond? Back to you, Jody.
Thank you so much, Michael. Now, Michael will be back with more of his insights later in the series, but for the moment, let's try to get a better understanding of how consumers are dealing with the recession. Kathy Sheehan is Senior Vice President and Managing Director of GfK Roper, one of the leading polling firms in the world. Kathy, welcome to PLMA's Live Special Report.
It's great to be here, Jody.
Now, tell me, what is your consumer research showing about the public's attitudes toward the recession? And do consumers feel the economy is getting any better?
Well, Jody, we at Roper Report speak to American consumers continually throughout the course of the year. And in 2009, we spoke to over 12,000 Americans about everything related to the economy and their habits in the retail space and related to various categories. And what I can say in 2010 is that Americans are feeling a little bit better about the economy, but by no means do they feel that the recession is over. Compared to this time last year in 2009, we have about 6% of Americans saying that they feel that the American economy is already in recovery. So that's a pretty small number of people, but it is, you know, some people feel that the economy is already improving. Overwhelmingly, though, we have 57% of Americans who feel that it's going to take 1 to 3 years for the economy to really be in recovery. Now, that number is down 8 points since 2009, so 57, it was higher last year, so more people last year were saying, you know, it was going to be 1 to 3 years, but still 57% is the majority of the population. So there is this sense that we're in an economic situation that is going to be with us for some time. So while I would say people feel a little bit more optimistic going in and into 2010 than they did in 2009, the economy is definitely weighing on consumers' minds and is a top concern.
Well, with that awareness of the economy, what are consumers saying that they're doing differently?
Well, we have seen some very interesting behaviors in this recession, and I would say this recession has been marked by consumer savviness that we have never seen before. We see that Americans are very, very deal conscious. Things such as couponing have been, you know, the coupon itself has really had a comeback in the 2009 recession. We see more and more people are using that. And then technology has also enabled that further. So more consumers are going online and using online couponing. We see that people are on eBay and they're selling coupons. So we see that, you know, in some respects, consumers have become very savvy and very deal seeking. So couponing is one area that we see has grown tremendously as a part of this recession, and we would anticipate that that would continue. We also see that consumers, again, getting back to this idea of being very deal seeking, we see that promotions such as, you know, back to last summer, we had cash for clunkers in the automotive category. We have cash for caulkers in terms of home renovation projects. So people are very, very interested in these type of promotions. Universally, they have been well received by the public. A lot of people have been interested in this. So I think, again, this speaks to an American consumer that is very savvy, very sophisticated, and very much looking to get deals.